Okay, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. New, highly interconnected and advanced cameras and license plate readers have everyone wondering what the flock is going on. We will talk about the thin line between crime fighting and the surveillance state. We've also got some good news, or potential good news. A federal court says the ATF can't, probably for now, enforce certain parts of the National Firearms Act, including the bit that says you have to register a suppressor or silencer with the federal government. The problem is it's very complicated and no one knows exactly how it's all going to pan out. And it seems like everyone is just kind of waiting to see who will be the first guy who ends up in jail. So for Unhinged, fake polls were run as social experiments on social media and politicians fell for them. Is anything even real anymore? We also have a bonus Unhinged today, so stay tuned for that. All of this and more on episode 549 of the In the Tank podcast. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lucan, your host. And as always, we also have Jim Lakely. Welcome back, Jim. He is the Executive Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute. Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow. And Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and Executive Editor of Healthcare News. We have everybody here again this week. And then I am not going to be here next week. So we have 1 week where we have the whole gang. And then we will be disappearing again. But before we get started, if you want to support this show, which we could use your support, honestly, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. YouTube refuses to monetize our channel for a multitude of reasons, mostly because they don't like our politics. But, if you click the thumbs up to like the video and share it, that helps to break through some of the suppression in the algorithm. Even just leaving a comment helps as well. Or do all of those things and really help us with the algorithm. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review on whatever platform you are using. So, okay, we have a lot to get through today. So I'm going to skip our chit chat because actually our unhinged segments here can be a little bit of chit chat. So fake polling run as a social experiment. This is Unhinged. We'd like to cut me off with the Q&A segment section on in the Climate Realism show. I hope we don't start doing it here too. Okay, so this is really a strange story from The Blaze. So there was a fake poll that humiliated Karen Bass that was part of a social experiment. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, a Democrat, triumphantly shared the results of a poll released last week showing that she enjoyed a 50 to 39% lead over Councilwoman Nitya Raman ahead of the November 3rd mayoral runoff. So Bass tweeted an image of herself besides a graphic of the poll results and wrote, "Doing the work, showing up and gaining momentum. Let's do this, LA." Unfortunately, for the Democrat, the poll, said to have been based on a survey of 560, which is a very small sample size, of LA voters between July 30th and August 5th, was totally fake. The outfit behind the poll, which calls itself Median Strategies, announced on its website that it has concluded its polling project and will not publish additional polls. All previously published polling releases have been withdrawn and should not be cited or treated as genuine polling data. Median Strategies was created as a short-term social experiment examining how purported polling information could enter and spread through the political information ecosystem without independent verification, added the bogus pollster. Bass is so mad about this that she's hinting at attempting legal action. Her campaign spokesperson told The Times, "This poll was reported on by a news outlet. Any bad faith attempts to influence elections should be investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Jim, the article says that while Bass fell for it, Spencer Pratt actually posted about the poll mocking it for being so unbelievable and ridiculous. I bet he's feeling pretty great about being right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Karen Bass, you got to be really high on your own supply to believe polls that ridiculous. I was thinking of another analogy that isn't quite as safe to say on a podcast, but I'll just stick with that one. Wow, political polls, some of them could be fake. What a surprise, I mean, all polls obviously are not fake, of course. I mean, we work with Rasmussen Reports and do polls, and they've made news, and talking about socialism and its impact, especially on youth. We did a poll during COVID that showed that Democrats were very much in favor of taking your children away if you didn't give them the vaccine, things like that. Absolutely crazy. But political polling has traditionally been not as accurate, especially in the last 10 years or so, accurate as they may have been in decades past. So part of that is because a lot of people don't answer the phone. A lot of it is still based on home phones. I know people are going to cell phones, but now people screen all of their cell phone calls. I almost never pick up my phone unless I know who it is calling me. And a lot of people are like that too. Younger people are harder to poll. Online polling is rife with bad data. But the public polling that is done, that tries to be accurate, consistently overrepresents Democrats or says that Democrats are going to do better in an election, especially a national election or statewide election, than actually turns out to be the case. I was looking at a study just this week that showed that in the last, I think, 3 presidential elections, so 2016, 2020, and 2024, Democrats were overpolled or overrepresented in the poll by at least 3%, sometimes 5.5% to 6% in these polls. And that's a huge miss. And of course, with the rise of Trump, not a single poll, not one, predicted Donald Trump was going to win the 2016 presidential election. But I actually think it's just hilarious that Karen Bass believed this poll. I think it's awesome that it was basically done as a gag. Let's call it a social experiment if you want. I think that she was being trolled. So maybe we'll see more of this, for more joviality in our politics.
I think the public opinion polls that are conducted for journalistic purposes are deliberately biased, and they're used to push a narrative that certain ideas, right of center ideas, are unpopular, and that left of center ideas are more popular. I don't think it's any accident. And I've long said, never trust the polls. Trust what politicians do. Trust what the candidates do. And then you'll know what the real polls look like, because the candidates get real polls. They have polling numbers that differ greatly, often differ very greatly from the published poll numbers. So they know what's really going on. When you see a candidate say what just happened in California, a candidate says, "I'll debate this person twice before the election now." Well, the internal polls are telling that person that they're vulnerable on this. And so you can tell by what they do, what the real conditions on the ground are, as opposed to the narrative that's being sent out there. But I do think in this case, in this particular case, the fraudulent hoax poll did a very good thing. And we need to do more things like this, in that it tested a candidate for their sense of humor. All Karen Bass had to do was say, "Yeah, you got me. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, we'll be more careful next time." Simple. then people would have said, might have said, well, I don't really agree with Karen Bass, but I agree with her on that. It's a silly thing. Let's not get overwrought about it. She flunked that one big time, and as of course she does with most tests from our perspective, or all tests really. So I think this was good. I think this is a good thing that you got to know a little bit more about Karen Bass, and something very important to know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sam, because it really does show like the kind of person that she is. If she makes a mistake, and what she does is she threatens the person who, bamboozled her with legal action, instead of saying, man, that was dumb. We should have checked. We should have made sure, because it was a pollster we hadn't heard of before. We should have made sure that it was a good one, but we did whatever. At least she didn't blame the aide, as far as I know, because it's random political aides that find these things and show them to the candidate and say, hey, you should tweet about this. At least she didn't blame them, because that would be even worse.
That's a really good point, though, because what did her internal polls say? They didn't have her up by 12 points. They can't have done. So she was just playing the game too, clearly, in which case the whole thing is ridiculous. And it just shows her in a very bad light if you look at it in an analytical way at all.
I think Karen Bass's entire political career can be seen in a very bad light. I'd say her behavior during the LA wildfires from a couple of years ago is a bit abysmal. She's a clown. I didn't want to waste my breath on her. But in terms of polls, what I've noticed is that there are polls tracking like the Angie Nixon Vindman race, and they were like 20 points off. Like, what the heck is going on there? Or the Francisco Hong race, she was supposedly up by double digits, and then she lost by a point or two. So what's going on with these polls? That's what I'm pretty curious about. I don't know if they're oversampling socialists, or if these are intended to try to make it as if the socialist candidates are, inevitably going to win. But something's going on with those polls.
Yeah. Wishes are fishes. And like Jim said about online polls, because I've been getting calls constantly from companies that at least purport to be some kind of a polling company, saying like, we're looking for your opinion on blah, blah. And I just click hang up instantly, because I'm not going to give you my information over the phone, because I don't know who you are. And two, I always wonder who gets these calls, because I'm looking at the polls and I think I've never gotten these calls before, but this year I am, and I'm not answering them because I don't trust them with my data. Because I'm not gonna answer your poll. But if you did them online, which is where everybody is, what you get is there's a phrase: every poll is a goal. And so online, that's especially true, because you'll get a whole bunch of people who will pile on it and vote for whatever is silliest just because it's funny. And that is extremely funny. Anyway, so I'm going to get to our bonus unhinged here.
Well, can I just take a quick poll?
Yeah.
Is September included in summer? Yes or no? Among these four people, I say yes.
Oh. We can ask the audience.
Meteorologically, yes.
Jim?
I say it depends on where you are. Where I live, no. Where you live, yeah. Where I live, yes, it's part of summer. Where you live, no, it's not part of summer.
I'm a bigger fan of cultural seasonal changes. So for me, fall begins Labor Day weekend. So,
okay. The reason I bring it up is because I was at the grocery store the other day, and there was so much pumpkin stuff, and I'm like, what is going on right now? It's August, and I'm seeing pumpkin. So I just
August
really threw me off my game here.
August is not fall. And I noticed that a couple weeks ago, the yogurt section had pumpkin yogurt, and I was like, no. Yeah. I am world's biggest white girl when it comes to fall stuff. I am a sucker for the pumpkin this and the apple pie crisp flavor, whatever. I love all of that stuff. I will put on the boots, I will put on the puffer vest, and I will go to an apple orchard. I'll do it all. Not now. It's August, September at the earliest.
And I'm sorry, but the other reason I bring it up is because this morning I was outside pretty early, and it was 59 degrees, and I was like, oh no, this is what's coming. It was not fun.
Yep. Alrighty, I'm gonna get us to our little other extra special unhinged today. This was submitted late, Jim, because he just came across it, and it is funny. We are going to play a clip from someone who is apparently the lead official for Mayor Mamdani of New York's groceries, I guess, effort to have state-run grocery stores or city-run grocery stores. So let's pull that clip.
I think ultimately the goals of these locations, not just here in East Harlem, but any borough location, is to be complementary to the neighborhood, and really rising tides, right? We can all cooperate and work together in a meaningful way.
Do you mind, what is the, I've heard that term from EDC officials, that these are meant to be complementary. What does that mean? What does that complementary mean in terms of policy, operations, and things like that?
Yeah, I think we're, as an agency, looking at a number of different complementary, policies and programs, grants, incentives that can come alongside these grocery stores to support other, local independent businesses that are in the neighborhoods. We're going to continue to listen, and we're going to continue to engage, and I'll be, alongside the operator as our partner. And like I said, making sure that we are complementary to the other businesses that are here in the neighborhood.
So other locations, other grocery stores can get grants from the city under this?
Something on the table. We're exploring a lot of different options and opportunities. I think there's a whole host of levers that the EDC is able to work within to make sure that everyone has equitable and equal access to opportunities here.
Thank you.
So Jim, what exactly is the IDF girl from World War Z saying here?
Well, yeah. Here's how this works. We're going to keep a close eye on this, the socialist Mamdani marts there in New York City, because it is going to be disastrous. But here's how it's supposed to work. Step one: use tax dollars to set up discount grocery stores to establish food equity. Step two: use tax dollars on, quote, policies and programs, grants, incentives that can come alongside these grocery stores to support other local independent businesses, unquote. Step three: the city grocery stores run out of food, and also the real grocery stores go out of business because they can't compete with city-owned grocery stores that are offering all the groceries at a 30% discount. Congratulations, you've now achieved food equity with no food for anyone. Way to go. This policy, the thing that triggered me on this and why I was hoping that you would allow a bonus unhinged today was when she said the rising tide, right? And so the supply side economics, free market economics, in the 80s, the phrase was a rising, hell, Sam knows this goes back to JFK in the 1960s. A rising tide lifts all boats, that a great churning economy is good for everyone. And this socialist, this actually dangerous socialist, who is very creepy looking, she would mark my name off her clipboard as I march to the gulag without losing a wink of sleep. This one, absolutely. But for her to use a rising tide lifts all boats, when the socialist program that they're putting in place for groceries to achieve food equity would actually end up, I wouldn't think it possible for people to starve and for shelves to be empty faster than they were behind the Iron Curtain in the 1970s and 80s. But this plan by Mamdani's, grocery czar would probably actually achieve that even faster than happened in the Soviet Union. What an accomplishment. Now that's progress, guys, when it comes to communism.
Well,
Absolutely.
A rising tide lifts all boats except those of the kulaks, whose boats we will burn.
Right.
Right.
I did find it interesting that she seemed to be saying, as far as I could discern, that they have no idea what they're doing. They have no plan. They're just going to spend as much money as it comes through comes into the coffers, and see what happens. And that's really bizarre, but it's par for the course when you vote for a pig in a poke, which is what they did. Mamdani is a slick character. He clearly modeled himself after the great Barack Obama, one of the incredible, brilliant statesman of U.S. history who won a Nobel Peace Prize before he actually even did anything. So this is all what you have to expect. And this is, to me, the limit of the attraction of democratic socialism. Always look at the long term, folks. This thing too shall pass because it is really, really dumb and it's very visible. The more you see of it, the more ridiculous and incomprehensible it becomes.
You know, these government-run grocery stores, there's going to be about 5 of them. They're benefiting from a 30% cost markdown in terms of what they're purchasing, so they can cut 30% off their price, and they can undersell all the bodegas, all the small grocery stores nearby. So this is actually fundamentally unfair. It is going to harm small businesses. Most of the bodega and grocery store in New York City are adamantly opposed to this because they understand that this is going to skew markets against them. It's only going to serve maybe a handful of people across New York. I mean, we're talking about 5 grocery stores in all of New York City. This is not a solution. This has been tried and failed many times in many countries and in the United States. Go look at Kansas City. They had a really bad government-run grocery store that had to close because not only was it bankrupt, but it also was full of crime and other bad stuff. So this is going to fail. I am just sad to see that they are wasting tens of millions of dollars, probably even hundreds of millions of dollars on this, when the city of New York and the city of New York City and the state of New York are totally broke. So this is just a really, really, really dumb idea.
We actually, if you guys recall, I just looked this up really quickly to find the episode number for you guys in the audience. If you are so inclined, we talked about the Kansas City government-run food stores back on episode 503 of this very show. So if you want to refresh your memory on what exactly we had to say in more detail on that, you can go there. Later in this show today, we're going to talk about the invasion of New York 250 years ago and how the martial law and the complementary rationing nearly sent the city over the edge then, and we'll see a similar disaster brewing now. In 1776, inflation spiked because, in part, of the food price caps that the British imposed. Though their rationale was that the low prices they offered for food were fair to the farmers, but the farmers ended up kind of creating something of a black market in order to sell at better cost for themselves. And colonists were forced to trade on the black market who weren't involved in actually growing the food. Everybody had to use this black market, bartering most of the time. But they could also use a currency that was worth more than the notes issued by the colonial government or the British, both of which were undergoing massive inflation at the time. And that was precious metals like gold and silver. And in the tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of the other guys. A great friend of Liberty and of the Heartland Institute as well, Ira Bershatsky owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. What does that mean for you? Well, it means everything Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. He is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is way too lacking in both other metals companies and also pretty much everywhere else today. We will see a little bit of that later in the show. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about our irresponsible government causing even worse inflation, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell and that you cannot be digitally locked out of, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. So that is climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know that we are the ones who sent you. That helps us while you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals at Advisor Metals. All right. we are going to get to our main topic here, which is titled "What
Ready?
the Flock is Going On." Unless anybody has any more strong feelings, stuff that they have to say about government grocery stores, but we have a lot of that, and we can actually save that for the end of the show because I am going to talk about rationing and stuff in New York. So everybody is making a lot of hay about these camera systems, especially the license plate readers by a company called Flock. The major issue here for a lot of people is that these are passive readers. So they scan every single car that goes by and they collect and store that data, albeit supposedly temporarily. And that window has been decreased recently by the company because they have been bombarded, I guess, with the public being very much not a fan of the way that this has been implemented. None of us really are a fan of how this has been going so far. Center Square reports Floridians debate Flock cameras as phones track even more. Thousands of AI-powered Flock cameras across Florida track drivers' locations and identify features of their vehicles every day. But smartphones' data collection often goes deeper. Where do consumers draw the line? And I'm not going to get too much into that side of the argument, but they do have good information here at the top of the article. The cell phone comparison, I think, is fair. But we can debate that later. But anyway, so DFlock, a project that maps ALPR installations and advocates against their use, has identified more than 8,000 Flock cameras in Florida. And as an aside, DFlock has is it dflock.com or dflock.org, Andy? I can't see on the screen. It's too small for me to see if it's
It's
.com or
.org, Linnea.
.org.
Okay, thank you. Dflock.org has the maps that can show you where these cameras and the license plate readers are. And so you can zoom into your location and see where they are. As you can see, obviously, they are centered mostly around higher population areas that have very active police precincts.
Can you hone in on Buffalo Grove, please? Just want to see that area, just so I know for the future. Thanks.
Guide me a little bit, Chris. I'm not exactly sure where it is.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's just okay. So I'll read this while you play around with the map. All right, thousands of AI-powered Flock cameras across Florida track drivers' locations, and I already read that. Anyway, DFlock, they are identifying more than 8,000 Flock cameras in Florida, and the ALPRs photograph passing vehicles and extract information, including your license plate number, the time, the location. And so this is what's scary about this, you guys, are a bit uncomfortable at best. It's tracking everything that it can tell about your car based on the video feed. This is AI powered, so it's able to keep track and make connections for your route every day. And all of that data is stored in its huge system. Obviously, because it is so comprehensive, it does have a fairly significant impact on, tracking down like known criminals and stuff if they have their vehicle information. But it's also passively collecting information about a lot of people who are not currently under investigation. And that's a problem. So over 5,000 law enforcement agencies, 1,000 businesses, and 6,000 homeowners associations have employed their use, according to Flock Safety. In Florida, some of the places that first welcomed Flock are having buyer's remorse. Sumter County suspended the use of Flock cameras after it came to light that a detective had abused the databases. Elsewhere, a Lake City council member tried to push for a non-binding referendum on the ballot to let voters weigh in on their use. His resolution was shot down after the police chief told the council that Flock had made a significant contribution to reducing gun violence in the city. Still, concerns over abuse and privacy had led to Flock Safety announcing updates this month designed to improve privacy, accountability, and security. When Flock recommended cutting down data retention periods from 30 days to 7 days, along with other changes, their CEO went further, saying that legislators needed to do their part to steward the technology. He said, mandate real auditing on every law enforcement data system, raise the penalties for misuse, which I think is something that they should be doing anyway. Because, if we're going to have a police force, which I believe that we should be having, at all, then abuse of that power, of that trust, should be penalized strongly. All right, Jim, I think you're the one here with like the strongest feelings about this, at least from our private chats. You're the one who has bombarded us with posts about everything going wrong with this system. In my view, it's not so much an issue with camera technology or even license plate readers, depending on how they're being used, but really it's about that passive collection of data when you're not under investigation. And really, I don't think that Flock, the company, is necessarily up to anything nefarious themselves from what I've read so far, trying to, learn as much about this as I can to see where exactly the holes and the issues are. They are trying, it seems, to close the gaps that allow for abuse of their systems. They're supposedly also implementing automatic lockouts for like weird behavior and the kind of thing that we saw in a post that you shared with us. If we can show this from what is it? Which one was it? The crazy person who was using Flock cameras to like stalk her ex.
Yeah, that's from the New York Post. Yeah, I saw this.
Yeah, from the New York Post.
It's an image there, Andy and Silas. You can add to the stage there. It says image. It's the other one, image from iOS. I didn't title it.
There we go. Yeah. Got it. Thank you. Yeah. So South Carolina cop, 24 years old, canned for using Flock cameras to run her ex's plate 166 times so that she could stalk him around town. Watch out. That's not good at all. And I imagine that, we're at the Heartland Institute. We're not going to support the government coming in and like crushing this company for having a good license plate reader, right? The problem, though, comes from the use case by local government and the abuse and overuse of this technology.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I watch a lot of British crime dramas, like the show Shetland, for instance. If anyone here is familiar with that show, it's an excellent show. At least the first few seasons, when they stick to the books, is an excellent show. But every single investigation they go check the CCTV. Every single one. It seems impossible for British detectives to solve any crime if they don't check the CCTV. It's really funny. How about looking for other clues? I don't know. But that aside, I hate the idea of cameras that have their, government-controlled cameras literally everywhere. Andy brought up that map of the United States, and he focused in on just the Chicagoland area. Donald Kendall, who sometimes is on this podcast, its original host, shared with us that website, and I looked up my zip code. And you can actually on that website look up your commute. You can go from here to here, so I put in my commute. I'm not going to tell anybody where I live. Too bad. But I put it in on the website. Oh, it's probably now they know. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Anyway, I passed no fewer than 11 Flock cameras in my, 7-mile drive. I mean, or maybe 10-mile drive. It's not that far at all. And I go through residential areas. I actually try to avoid the freeway. I could take it. I don't want to. And so it's a relatively short drive. 11 Flock cameras. I had no idea they were there. Your eyes are looking for those red light cameras, which will get you, which is just a revenue generator for localities, not really a crime prevention or a traffic accident prevention measure. In fact, they cause more accidents than they prevent. That's proven through many, many studies. But, I had no idea these Flock cameras were there. Now I know what they look like, and I'll be looking out for them. And now I know from this website exactly where they are, and I'll be making note of that to watch them. But this is as you said, Linnea, I mean, I'm really probably the most black-pilled on this of our group as we were chatting this week together. That I just hate the idea of all of these cameras under government control. It's one thing to have a Ring camera in front of you, in front of your house. That's private property. That's you wanting a camera to surveil your own property and to protect yourself, to look out for the Amazon driver, all that stuff. It's fine. As we showed, there's a cop, 24-year-old, using Flock cameras to track her ex 166 times. I mean, the idea that government would not abuse this power. Of course, the government would abuse this power. Government bureaucrats would abuse this power. And it treats every single free American citizen as a suspect and not a citizen. You are treated as if you were a suspect, even though you were doing absolutely nothing wrong. And the idea that if you take this off to a more logical conclusion, they can, what is it? Show me the man and I'll show you the crime, right? From the old Soviet days.
Laurenti Beria.
That's right. Beria. And so this is just too far into that direction. I can understand that if there's an Amber Alert or there's a mass shooter on the loose, that this could be very, very helpful in tracking that person down. I'm sorry, that's not a good enough trade-off to me. Even that, we should not be living in a surveillance state. This is our first episode on flock cameras, which, frankly, I hadn't even heard of them until about 2 months ago. The company that started this across the country I looked it up, started in 2020, and it really has ramped up over the last 2 or 3 years. There are now hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these flock cameras all over the cities and suburbs of the United States. I paid attention to the news. I'd literally never heard of them until about 2 months ago. In fact, I think Donnie brought it up first in our chat, and I was like, what the hell's a flock camera? I've never even heard of it. And now they're already everywhere. We do live in a surveillance state. We are being watched by the government. I've seen where I heard of flock cameras, actually the first time I heard of flock cameras, people were taking baseball bats to them and smashing them up in their neighborhoods. I guess we need to distribute a lot more baseball bats. I don't like this at all. I think they should all be taken down.
Unfortunately, my privacy bubble was burst a long time ago when I read all the Edward Snowden stuff. So the NSA has been vacuuming up my data for a very long time. I don't have any social media footprint. I try not to do anything, that can be tracked, on social media. But Google, Gmail, I mean, geez, I know that it's already over for me. That does not mean that I'm like for this whatsoever at all. I think this is a gross violation of privacy, but I'm just saying, I just feel like this, the ship has sailed on this a long, long time ago. I have been watching a lot of very interesting debates between people who are on both sides of this issue. And one of the things that I've noticed is that pro-flock people have definitely over-exaggerated the amount of crimes that are solved, because those crimes are not solved solely by the flock camera. What happens is if the flock camera is used and the crime gets solved, then it's being said that the flock camera, led to the crime, being solved. That's not true though, because it's one of many, many, many other metrics that are, involved there. Another thing is, let's say you drive to an AA meeting. All they have to do is put together the fact that the AA meeting is occurring at said location, and then they know, guess what? This guy's got an alcohol problem. So this could be used in so many different fashions. Oh, we're going to jack up his insurance. Oh, this guy's ESG score is going to have to take a hit because he's going to AA meetings, NA meetings, whatever it is. This guy takes too many trips to the grocery store. He's spending, too much, just whatever it is. This is tracking, on a basis that's never been, I guess, ever been infiltrated on such a massive scale. The argument that this is akin to a cell phone is totally not is a apples to oranges comparison, because you make a choice when you have your cell phone on you. I can choose not to. There should be a decent level of privacy when you are walking or driving on a public roadway. Why does my movements, whether I'm riding a bike, riding a motorcycle, walking, whatever it is, have to be tracked by these cameras? And it's not just license plate readers. These things also have AI capabilities and their facial recognition technologies that are also being used. So there's a lot more that's going on. And this notion that they only keep the information for 3 days and then it deletes itself, that is not true either, because they have all sorts of backup systems that can keep the stuff forever. So I think there's, the more that Americans understand this, the more that of a backlash there's going to be. We've already seen the backlash. Jim mentioned the baseball bats. People have taken their cars and run them down. People are really up in arms about this, as they should be, because we do have the right to privacy in the United States of America.
There's an interesting point here about the use of cell phone data, which is that the cell phone companies do collect that data and they store it and they keep it themselves. And the Supreme Court has ruled that the police have to get a warrant in order to get that data. With Flock, it's entirely different. The government accumulates the data. The government seems to need no warrant to do this, to access that data. And so it is an absolute intrusion into privacy. There is no way on earth that anyone is free in a situation like that. When the government can track you that way, they can use that against you in so many ways because, as Jim pointed out, you show me the person and I'll show you the crime. So this is a very bad thing that has happened to the United States in a very brief time. And I think there's going to be, it's not going to play out the way we all have been thinking it will, that this is just going to be okay. Governments are going to do it, and that's all there is to it. First of all, a lot of governments are now, especially local governments, obviously, are dialing it back a bit and putting some restrictions on it. To me, the big problem is not the abuses that we need to worry about. It's the uses. It's the legal uses that these could be put through. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that there are very, very strong restrictions on who in the government can look at this data and when and under what circumstances, how long they can keep it, and so on and so forth. Local governments are starting to consider those things. I think state governments will end up doing so as well. Ultimately, though, if I had to guess, I would think that the Supreme Court, because it's going to get there,
Yep.
is going to rule that something about a sort of a compromise that, yes, you can have those cameras, yes, you can store the data, but no, the police and the tax people and so on and so forth can't look at the data unless they get a warrant. What that would do, I think, is really limit the amount of data then that these cameras would be used to collect, because what's the point? You don't have free access to it anymore. So there isn't a really good incentive for the government to do it. But even if they did, you're protected. And you know how you're protected? Because if you were put through this and you were convicted of a crime or fined or something, and they didn't have the right to access to it, you're off the hook. So we need to go through a process, I think, where we're going to figure out how to balance the supposed advantages of this system with the obvious gross disadvantages and the immense amount of power that this hands the government. We're going to have to figure that out, and I think we will. But it's only going to happen if people like us and our listeners and people across the country are raising a stink about it, because otherwise everyone will just say, all the governments will say, hey, the police are solving crimes because of this. Don't you want the police to solve crimes? And my answer to that would be, yes, I want them to solve crimes, and they used to solve crimes very well too. So they did it without this. Maybe they could do it without this going forward. But even so, if they truly do get an advantage from it in some cases where it is justly used, fine, get a warrant.
Yeah, but Sam, the thing is that it doesn't matter about the warrant, because FISA warrants were totally abused. I mean, give me a break. Once that data is there, someone's going to abuse it. That's why I think the real way to get rid of this is to have a groundswell of American people saying no. No. Because once this infrastructure is in place, there's going to be no getting rid of it. And I mean, I don't trust the NSA. I don't trust Comer. I don't trust any of those guys. They sat in front of Congress and lied and said, no, we are not sweeping up Americans' data. Yes, they do. Yes, they did.
They lied to us. You're right.
They can't be trusted with this. This is too much information for one central body to have, access to. It's just, it's there's too much of a potential for abuse.
I agree, and you're right. They lied to the courts. That is, to me, the essential element there, that they lied to the courts about this. The point is, though, that although the Russiagate did go forward and did have its effects in hamstringing the Trump administration in the initial 4 years. And those are terrible things. It did come to light eventually, and we're starting to understand exactly how deeply corrupt our governments are at all levels. And that is obviously a good thing, and we've got to proceed down
I
that
don't know.
path.
I have such a different
And
view.
the
I think that
objections to flock cameras are certainly legitimate. I would rather not have them at all. I would absolutely prefer that.
it seems to
And
me like
so,
I don't know. It just seems to me like most Americans are not nearly, when it comes to their privacy in terms of the social media and the phone stuff, I think that they've totally given up on that. And if they give up on this, which I really hope they don't, then I think that all notions of privacy are basically gone.
well, as Ben Franklin said, those who will give up freedom for security will have neither, and that's what we're looking at. But like I say, the analogy with the phones isn't perfect by any means. They're not congruent, because with the phones, the government has to get permission from a court to do it, whereas with these cameras, they don't. And so I think that limitation will probably end up being put on them, and that will have certainly a positive effect. But in my view, what happened here was that these were brought in as a tax revenue generating operation, and bringing in those cameras got local governments a whole lot of money from people speeding or going through red lights and the like. And so everyone, I think there's a natural inclination to hate this anyway, for the public to hate this. So I don't think it has the level of support that we've all assumed. People are only now just finding out about it.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to get hit from both ends. They're going to get hit from the legal end, ultimately from the courts, and they're going to get hit from the public end, where people are going to hold politicians' feet to the fire for this. So I think we have good chances for a much better situation going forward than we have right now. But we have to make sure that we're talking about these things and bringing them to light and getting people on it.
Sam, I hate to disagree with you, and I really don't disagree with you that much even on this topic. But, getting a better outcome sometime in the future, a little better than what we have now. What we have now is a dystopian surveillance state, man. Getting a warrant is good. And Chris stole my thunder, because I was typing this out so I wouldn't forget just as he was saying it.
Great minds think alike.
Yes. Getting a warrant, Sam, that is good, but it's not great protection. In fact, it's hardly any protection at all from abuse. And I was just going to say, as Chris said, look at the FISA court. It was abused to spy on innocent people in the Trump campaign. They had their lives ruined, and not a single person paid a price for that who did that abuse. Not one. I don't care about one guy, losing his ability to practice law in Washington, D.C. for 12 months. That's not punishment. Not a single person who abused that power in FISA paid a price. And FISA wasn't even reformed. We didn't even get FISA reform after all of that abuse. And so if the people who abused that power, and if they paid a price, and if we got FISA reform, I might feel slightly different about this, Sam. But just getting a warrant before you can look at the passive surveillance of American citizens, I'm sorry, that's not good enough for me. At least with FISA, with all the abuses, it was targeted and active surveillance of particular people. This is passive surveillance of the entire country. And then, I'm going to feel better because they got a warrant before they found out where I traveled on this day. Hey, sir, what were you doing in this other town? You don't live there. Why were you shopping at this grocery store 7 towns away from where you are? That's pretty suspicious. Hey, why did you visit that gun store? Somebody in the comments had mentioned that flock cameras are pointed at the parking lots of gun ranges. And I'm sorry, solving crimes is really important. But it's a lot less important to me, especially with all these Soros DAs out there in America, in most of our large cities, that let guilty people walk. Nobody stays in jail for committing crimes anymore in this country. Are you kidding me? I am not going to sit here and lay down and hope that we do a better job protecting our liberties with flock cameras. I'd rather that they just be unable to be used. by law enforcement or government agencies at all. And Linnea, you mentioned in the lead up to this, lead into this topic, that the price that this is why I'm so angry about this, because nobody who abused the FISA system, and that was a grave abuse of the civil liberties of completely innocent Americans, not a single person paid a price. I would be okay with flock cameras being used by government agencies if the definitions of abuse of that power were very strict and specifically defined, and the punishment for abusing the information on flock cameras was 20 years in prison. You go to Leavenworth for pretty much the rest of your adult life if you abuse this power. That is never going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. So I prefer that these flock cameras be removed, and that municipality by municipality, people rise up and tell their local town, their local township, their local county that these things gotta go.
No. What? No.
I saw a funny thing on LinkedIn where it said, it's like,
I do agree with both of you as to how awful this system is. What I'm talking about is I think that there will be corrective action taken, and that I'm looking forward to that. But no, I fully agree with you. Now, here's the thing. It used to be that you would have a policeman, walking the beat, and he would walk up and down the streets in a neighborhood, and you can make an argument that flock cameras are the same sort of thing. But here's the big difference is that if you had as many policemen walking the streets as you have in terms of flock camera coverage, people would have risen up in arms against the government and taken it down. So,
yeah, but B cops also didn't have a computer chip where you could say, I want to look at everything you've seen for the past, weeks, months, years.
Right. No, I fully agree. This is the point I'm making, is that this is amping that up to a level that's simply not just unprecedented. It was previously unimaginable. And so what we're seeing today, I think, is a really good reaction to it, that people are, as soon as it becomes well known that this is going on, people are very upset about it. And I think we're going to see more and more of this reaction to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing this play out, where these cameras will either not be put up at all, which is I would certainly be happy to see that happen, that they stopped and took them down, in fact, or that they're at least that the limitations on how the data can be used, and that you have to get a warrant and so forth, get those things on there right away. But ultimately, if you want to have police looking at everybody all the time, you're clearly living in a police state. And I really don't think the American people are going to settle for that.
Here's an easy solution. You just tell all the homeless meth heads in California that these things have like a decent amount of copper in them and some like aluminum and some gold, and
Platinum.
they can just go and dismantle them and sell them, and maybe even make their own crack pipes out of them. I don't know.
Linnea, you've heard.
Are you serious?
I'm really trying to
bounty
keep
for
this on
flock
the air,
cameras.
and this entire episode, I've realized, is just designed to make people on this show advocate for committing crimes.
Well, you haven't said much on this topic, Linnea.
Vigilantism.
I've made a terrible mistake in having multiple topics on a single show that would lead to these kinds of statements. But yeah, so I think that this is the lamest answer possible. I think everybody is correct. I think ultimately what you want is for these things to not be there at all, because you don't want that infrastructure getting in place. Because even if we have all the safeguards in place, if you have, random commie takeover, now you have the infrastructure for mass surveillance, like what's happening now already. So that is a problem. However, we also have to have kind of like plan B, I think. in case these things don't get taken down everywhere. And it doesn't do us any good to like stomp our feet and to say, well, I wish they were. Well, if wishes were fishes, once again, if they aren't, if this is something that we are going to have to live with, what do we do to limit the effect of it as much as possible? One of the things that I thought of when I was kind of pondering over this was maybe there's legislation or something that says these things actually cannot be on 24/7 passively recording. Maybe they have to only be turned on when there's an active pursuit or something. That would at least cut down on the ability for them to track random people's day-to-day patterns, unless you're in like absolute downtown Chicago or something where they're in active pursuit every 10 minutes. I'm trying to think of solutions in case the best case doesn't happen.
How about this? And I mean, I literally just off the top of my mind right now, what if they were only put in very high crime areas? Would you guys have less of a problem with that? I think I would have less of a problem with that, because then it was, I mean, we're talking about areas that are
Targeted.
very, very high crime. Like Chicago does have that
Water.
the system in place where they try to detect where gunshots are fired.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people have problems with that. I don't think that there's as much of a problem with it being very localized to very high crime areas. And once the threshold maybe of a certain, crime percentages drop, then you remove them. I mean, that to me would be at least much more of a, hey, we want to use these for a very specific purpose, although I still am not in favor of them. Okay. But, like known drug, corners or stuff like that, where drive-bys happen a lot. I mean, that would at least say, okay, we're going to deploy them in a very small targeted area, really trying to prevent crime. But like I said earlier, I've seen debates with people who are pro-flock saying that they're used in tens of thousands of crime, like solving crimes. But the data does not back that up. The guy from the ACLU who was debating this guy said, wait a second, you are conflating so much. And I don't want to repeat this, but basically if it's used in an investigation and the investigation is solved, then they automatically say that the flock camera did all the investigative work, which is not true.
Chris,
Interestingly,
it's too late to just put them in high crime areas. I mean, did you see that map that Andy had up?
No.
I asked Grok, how many of these cameras are there out there right now? And it said it's approximately, from the company's own estimates, could be as high as 120,000 cameres. The thing is that I had no idea that this was going on like this, and that these cameras had that kind of ability. It's one thing to have
really flown under the radar, Jim. You're right about that.
Yeah.
I just learned about this like a couple of weeks ago.
I reported on the idea of hotspots, that there are crime hotspots, and that really almost all of real street crime occurs in a very limited number of places. And the reality is that police departments have been able to reduce that crime, and always have been able to, without cameras. So you don't even need flock cameras there.
So then why the need for that?
All you need to do is look at your records of where crimes have been committed, and then say, okay, we're going to concentrate on that area. And then you have the drive-throughs and the guys on bikes, and gals as well, on bikes, and people on foot, foot police, and so forth. And then the crime moves to another area, and you catch it over there, and so on and so forth. But you don't even need cameras for that purpose, although I think that would be an improvement if it were limited to that. I don't even think it's necessary there. So the whole thing that this is that this is what's stopping crime, because that's what we're hearing now, especially from the left of center people. Oh, you got to have these SWAT cameras, or else the crime rate's going to go back up. Wait a minute. The reason the crime rate is down, well, let's say the crime rate is down, and it seems to have followed a real huge push against illegal immigration. So just saying, If the crime rate's down,
The crime rate's down in places like
we don't need
Chicago because they're cooking the numbers big time. We all
True.
know that they're taking
also true.
more felonies and dropping them down to misdemeanors and such. However, as Jim explained earlier, I think this is a point that is not being focused upon enough. And in a place like Chicago, with Mayor Brandon Johnson, who says, I am the wokest of the woke, and every criminal is, a victim, and I'm going to let him back out in the streets because he's somehow, been a victim of the system, to then say, but then we're going to also put in place this dragnet of cameras because every single person in my city is a possible criminal. That does not make sense. You can't have it both ways. That to me is something that I'm going to maybe personally just try to argue much more of, because we see in places like Chicago or places, like New York City, all across, California, Virginia, most recently, that these criminals are being let out and they're killing people and they're committing heinous crimes. So how can you on one hand say we're all about making it that this woke social justice utopia, but we also have to have universal mass surveillance because any of you can commit a crime at any point? It does not. Those two things cannot coexist.
Quite right. Does Chicago, does Chicago report their statistics to the FBI? Because many big cities now don't. That's
another thing.
And
right.
so we have, so they may not be affecting the record if they're not reporting it. But I think the point is very clear that you don't need these cameras to solve crimes. You don't need them for any purpose except to be able to trap ordinary people in prosecutions that you want to use against them for what are ultimately political and power purposes. And to me, that's why I say I'm not so much worried about the abuse of these, because all of it is ultimately sort of aimed toward abuse. It's not aimed toward stopping crime. It's aimed toward abuse.
If you combine, we talk about AI a lot on this program. If you combine the power of AI to analyze data, and the amount of data collected by these flock cameras is immense. It's so immense that a human being would not actually be able to make much sense of it on their own. But of course, this data is going to be combined with the power of AI data analysis to very quickly determine, it just soups up this passive surveillance state of Big Brother even more. And that is one of the things that really concerns me in the back of my mind, is that when you add in AI to this technology, and absolutely nothing good, especially for our liberty, comes from it.
Okay, I'm going to add one other thing that I see that will come out of this is the use and much greater distribution of jammers. You just run a jammer in your car, and then of course what will happen, because this is obviously, there must be some way of doing it. And then obviously the police will start looking for jammers and so on and so forth. This is a thing that happens all the time. Is that government grabs more and more power, and it doesn't care so much to grab power from the criminal classes. They don't mind that. Anarcho-tyranny is their way of doing things. They want to grab power from the people who work for a living, the people who pay taxes. They want you, me, Linnea, Chris, everybody who's listening and watching this podcast to live in fear of them. The point is, we own them, and we need to get ourselves in gear and make sure that we get what we deserve and get our rights protected, because the government has the authority the only authority government has is to protect our life, liberty, and property. And they don't have a right to have any incursions on our liberties, which is what this is. They don't have any right to have any incursions on our liberties that we did not give up by nature of some bad act. So yes, this is something that is going to continue to play out throughout human history, as long as there are people who care about freedom.
In terms of good news, so KWTX News reports that a North Texas county has shut down its network of flock automated license plate reader cameras, saying the technology amounts to warrantless surveillance of residents going about their daily lives, which is definitely true. And that's as Sam said earlier, that is the way that this is going to get solved. It's going to be litigated. It's going to make it into the courts, and hopefully the courts rule well on this for us. But I'm going to move us into our next topic, which will cause people to say things that can get us taken off of the the website, which is the issue of, can I now buy a silencer without filling out all those forms? So I like gun issues. We don't talk about the Second Amendment stuff all that much at Heartland in the last couple of years because we've had, a lot of our time being taken up by the climate issue and energy and socialism, all of that stuff. But I will bring it up when I can because it's fun and interesting. No, I will not show a gun for a demonstration on this episode today. But this is
what?
that is very unique to America. And so for our foreign audience, they might find this very interesting. And it's also really important to us. So that being said, anti-gun people are very upset by the results of a recent North Texas court case. CBS News says some Americans can now possess short-barreled rifles, shotguns, and silencers without registering them with the federal government after the Trump administration declined to pause a Texas judge's ruling issued earlier this month that deregulated those weapons. The August 5th ruling by U.S. District Judge James Wesley Hendricks of the Northern District of Texas gave the Justice Department a one-week deadline to request a stay before his ruling went into effect. That deadline expired at midnight on Thursday, so the Trump administration is not trying to fight this too hard. So today, our government is failing us, said Chris Brown, the president of a gun control group. At midnight, uniquely lethal weapons and devices, including silencers, short-barreled rifles, and shotguns, were deregulated for the first time in nearly a century. All right. So the first thing to understand about this case is that it's not actually a Second Amendment case, which is very interesting. It should be, but it's not. The plaintiffs in this case, there are two groups of them: Jensen plaintiffs, which is a bunch of individuals and small businesses, and the Silencer Shop Foundation cases, which include some individuals and also companies like Palmetto State Armory, organizations like Gun Owners of America, FPC Action, and others, along with several states, litigated this on how certain parts of the National Firearms Act are unconstitutional based on the issue of taxation, not gun rights. So before I get into explaining what's going on here in detail, I'm going to go to our panel very briefly because Sam, all of this being said, before we go any further, because any nuanced discussion or anything always makes certain types of people wig out if you don't first do your land acknowledgement and say the NFA and Gun Control Act are unconstitutional in and of themselves. Right.
The logic and reasoning of the and the law behind the decision the court made was absolutely right. They got it right, and the fact that it's been 100 years since we've had the right legal court decisions on this sort of thing, I don't look at that as something to lament, except for our history. It's something to be happy for, that a court got it right. I think the chances are good, just briefly, chances are good that down the road this will be upheld. The Second Amendment issue should have been attended to in this case. It's important, but there's also the fact that we're going to get to the Second Amendment issue in a lot of cases. So get this one right. Get it that the statute was no longer effective, if it ever was. That the statute was no longer legally justified because of the removal of the tax.
Yeah.
That's to me incontrovertible. It's of course it's not. It doesn't pertain anymore. So that's a given, and we need to get to the Second Amendment issues as well, and we will in a variety of cases going forward. This is real progress. It's not going to change America in a flash or anything. People aren't going to be running through the streets with silenced guns and shooting at one another any more than they were doing before. So because it's still basically illegal to do that. So you can possess them. There's a difference between possessing something and running through the streets with it and using it on people. You can possess a hammer. That's fine. But running through the streets and brandishing it at people and trying to hit them is still not legal. And let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah, there are two things that are complicated here. Oh, there are a lot of things that are complicated here. For gun ownership, gun issues are always complicated because government has made them complicated.
Yes.
And especially right now, rules from the ATF, rules under the NFA, which is National Firearms Act, and the Gun Control Act it's like I've heard it compared to a super complex, three-dimensional, orb weaver web that's in all different directions.
It's a thicket.
And what often happens is you'll have a court case like this that will snip one little section of it, and people will say, "Yay, we're free." And it's like, no, it's not.
You're free of that.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a court case that I'm talking about here, guys. For those of you who are not aware of what we're talking about, we're kind of talking over the audience a little bit here, but so much lawyerly talk surrounds the results here that even professional gun rights lawyers have looked at this case as result and replied like, I don't know, to questions about whether or not some random person or any person federally allowed to do so can now easily go buy an SBR without filling out a form, SBR being short-barreled rifle. The NFA was originally passed under the taxing power of Congress, meaning that Congress explicitly stated that the purpose was focused on raising money for the government. So the NFA taxes the making and transfer of machine guns, silencers, short-barreled rifles, explosive devices, short-barreled or sawed-off shotguns, and a category called any other weapons. Making means what it sounds like. So if I want to make a homemade silencer out of objects from the hardware store and I don't fill out the right forms and register it and pay a tax, this is in the past is how this worked, and register it and pay a tax before I even collect the ingredients that I would need to manufacture it, I am in trouble. I could go to jail for a long time. So then entered Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. If we recall, it's been a while since we talked about the One Big Beautiful Bill. It eliminated the $200 tax stamp fee and other fees on the suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns, and also any other weapons. So that's just a category. It doesn't actually mean like every other weapon. There are other weapons that are regulated by the NFA, like the machine guns and explosives. The Big Beautiful Bill didn't touch those. So after that bill, even though the tax stamp requirement was removed, other requirements like the background checks and the registration and the approval stuff were all still in place. Now, silencers are treated as firearms under the NFA. So you still need to fill out a form and get the background check in order to buy it. But the court has held that because the $0 tax doesn't actually bring in any revenue, the NFA provisions that were challenged can't be sustained under the tax power of Congress because they're not bringing any revenue in. So those portions of the NFA are unconstitutional now because of the $0 cost. So you can't have them. But it gets even more complicated. The injunction only applies to the plaintiffs, not the whole country. So the judge didn't make an official declaration that like portions of the NFA are broadly unconstitutional. If you live in a state that was not one of the plaintiff states, it doesn't apply to you. This is why voting for things like Attorney General is really important, by the way. But if you join one of the plaintiff organizations or are a customer of one of the plaintiff businesses, then probably, like Palmetto State Armory or something, probably this new rule does apply to you. Maybe. But also maybe not. depending on where you live. So I would strongly recommend, there's a bunch of gun ownership organizations right now that are celebrating this, saying, well, if you join our group, we're giving you a discounted membership or whatever. And if you join us, then you can buy a silencer without filling out certain forms and stuff. I would recommend caution on that and waiting for a minute. I would even more strongly recommend against like sawing down that barrel for the sake of your own life and also probably the life of your dog. It's not fair. The NFA and the Gun Control Act are bad. They are unconstitutional, but real penalties still exist for violating them. And the way that violators are treated is extreme, as we have seen in relatively recent American history. So proceed with extreme caution. I talked about this the last time I talked about guns. Someone just printing out, using a 3D metal printer to print out like a part of a gun that would make it be able to fire as an automatic. But they didn't actually use it that way. They just printed out the like outline of it on a little piece of metal, like a little dog tag. They're in jail right now still. So be careful. If you are a little bit confused, you are now in the everybody is confused club with the rest of us. So the ATF tried to argue that the Commerce Clause can apply, but Congress didn't explicitly attach this like NFA thing to the Commerce Clause, so they can't do it. And so that's why this went our way. I don't think a lot of Americans are aware of how that's some of like how bills work. That they're limited in scope based on how they're filed, right, Sam? I'm going to go to you on this again because I think you know a pretty good amount about like commerce and tax clauses of Congress.
Yes, there's the matter of severability. First of all, that was it in the original bill that if any provision is found to be unconstitutional or otherwise invalid, does the rest of the bill stand? So that's an important issue here. But the main thing is that, yes, that tax was unconstitutional. You are absolutely right about that. And it should have been shot down. Shot down. I hope we won't get in trouble for me saying that in the first place, because of that. You can't, the Congress shall make no laws restricting firearms. And a law that taxes firearms specifically is a law that restricts firearms. There's no question about that. There's no way to question that. So what is the law itself was originally wrong in the first place, and it should be shot. It should be removed, invalidated as soon as possible. But that said, yes, the tax was clearly a federal government restriction on buying guns, and there was no way that could stand. And as I said, the judge was absolutely right.
I have a very simple question, Linnea. What was the reason for these laws in the first place?
What, the NFA?
Well, why?
I mean, just trying to restrict people from being able to own machine guns and silencers.
Okay, no. But under what justification are they saying that silencers need to be so heavily regulated? That's my question.
Public safety, I guess, which is kind of silly because
is there any evidence to back that up? That
no, there's almost I don't think a single maybe an assassination has been done with a suppressed
so
weapon
these are just
before,
draconian
but
regulations.
Almost never used because, and you notice again, and I can get heated about this, but you'll notice again the weapons that are mostly used in crimes are handguns. Those are not the weapons that regulators try to go after. They try to go after, or like gun rights or opponents.
But even
like
more importantly,
go after like rifles and stuff, which are very rarely, comparatively, used in even mass shootings.
But even more importantly, but wait, Sam, hold on. Even more importantly, guess what? Criminals don't obey laws anyways. So if you have a law saying we're gonna make it impossible for you to get a silencer, or a sawed-off, or whatever it is, machine gun, blah blah blah, guess what? Criminals aren't going to abide by those. They're going to go on the black market and they're going to get those guns because Chicago, where we live, has a quote gun-free zone, but there are tons of shootings in Chicago all the time. So if you say that you can't have guns in said area, obviously criminals, because they don't follow the law in the first place by definition, are going to have those quote illegal guns in said area. So this whole thing
Certainly.
is so preposterous. It's just it's such a joke. It's a government cash grab. It's another draconian regulation intended to just for the federal government to say, no, you actually don't have the right to bear arms. You have the right to bear arms when we say you can under these circumstances. The Second Amendment is pretty clear. Americans have the right to bear arms. I'm not saying that we should go and buy tanks and bazookas and blah, blah, blah. That's such a bad argument. I've heard that so many times. But if you want to have a long rifle, if you want to have a Magnum, if you want to have a silencer, whatever it is, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
The reason the government went after silencers and the reason they go after the fictional assault rifles and so forth, the reason they do that is because most people will think, well, yeah, I should be allowed to have a handgun even if I don't have one. I should be allowed. But hey, I don't need a silencer. I can't imagine that I'll ever need an assault rifle, whatever that is. So what they're trying to do is eat away.
Well, do you need air conditioning? Do you need an oven? It's like, well,
they're trying to. That's my point, though. Is that, well, they tried to get rid of those things too. But the thing is, they try to eat away at your sense of your right to bear arms, so that they can chip away at it as much as possible, and then suddenly they can get through a law that they fancy the Supreme Court will uphold, and everybody will just be fine with. The whole thing is just a matter. It's an attempt to gaslight people into thinking that the Second Amendment is something much more limited than it really is.
It's also part of the canard
by chipping away at it,
they hope guns don't kill people, criminals kill people.
By chipping away at it, they hope over time to get everybody's guns out of their hands. And yes, of course, that's the whole point, is that they go after law-abiding people, not criminals. And the idea is to turn law-abiding people into criminals by fiat. It's all stupid and wrong. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, all gun laws treat Americans as criminals. That's what flock hammers are doing. They're treating every American like a criminal. It's obviously not inherently dangerous to have a short-barreled rifle or even a sawed-off shotgun. The problem, of course, is when they're used by criminals in the commission of a crime, as Chris pointed out. You know, knife assaults are higher in the UK than here because they don't have a Second Amendment. And there have been ridiculous calls for knife control, even kitchen knives. You know, I remember seeing a story not too long ago that all kitchen knives in the UK should have rounded tips, for instance, so you can't stab somebody very easily. I suppose you can still slash their throat. Maybe that's a little harder than stabbing somebody. I mean, but it's ridiculous because lefties are always ridiculous. And speaking of ridiculous, Linnea, I have a question for you. The gun grabbers in this country seem to think that silencers.
I guess Jim has been
Speaking of
silenced.
silencers.
Yeah, Jim has been silenced by formatting.
ATF is watching.
Yeah, that's right. No, but
NSA.
They seem to think that silencers work like they do in the movies, right? Like, that's the sound that comes out. So that they literally do. I guarantee you, most of the gun grabbing activists in this country believe that that's how silencers really work, because they've never actually seen a real silencer on a real gun and seen it, fired off. You have, I'm sure.
You sure about that?
I'm pretty sure about that.
We are sure about that. Yeah, no, it's not anywhere near what you see in the movies. It's really just, and in fact, actually, I believe in the UK, suppressors and silencers are sold as hearing protection devices, and so I think they might have like some kind of a request form or something that you have to fill out prior to purchase. But they are less intensely regulated there, from what I have heard, than they are here until now, I guess, kind of. But here's the bottom line on this, you guys, is this ruling has been, a lot of like gun YouTubers and stuff have been acting like this means that you can just go out and not have to fill out any forms for these weapons and silencers now. And that doesn't seem to be the case. Even if you're one of the plaintiffs, I would strongly recommend, because like I said at the opening of the show, it seemed like all the smart people are not doing anything right now about it. They're not rushing out to go buy a silencer because they're waiting to see who the first person to get arrested for misunderstanding who the supplies to is, or the first dealer who loses their license for misapplying this ruling. So I strongly recommend waiting until the ATF actually puts out like official statements on what this means. I'm not saying the ATF are the good guys in the situation or something. My goodness. Sometimes when you talk to people about gun stuff, they act like any time you explain what the law is, that you're some kind of bootlicker or something and that you're excusing the law. I'm not excusing the law. It's all an infringement. But I'm saying don't get yourself arrested or shot. Please be careful and don't jump and do anything rash when you do not have to. If you want a really good detailed breakdown of what this means and what's going on and like the levels of safety, I would strongly recommend going over to the YouTube channel Fudbusters. That guy is an actual like gun manufacturer as a hobbyist, but his day job is that he's a Second Amendment lawyer. So he knows guns literally inside and out and all the regulations around them. He's also urging caution on this. He's got a video about this ruling that's about an hour long on just the injunction. And he also has a pretty funny live stream that he does with a buddy of his too, kind of like ours, where they just do gun news. So I would check them out. You don't have to agree. Maybe you feel confident to go buy something before a ruling comes out or before like an official rule is released by the ATF. But I would strongly recommend caution in this case, just because this particular area of our rights that have been stripped from us can lead to you being shot and killed in your home. So please be careful. All right. The invasion of New York City, America at 250. So speaking of, jackboots taking your guns away and all those other things. So this week begins one of the darkest moments in the Revolutionary War. New York City was much smaller than it was today, but it had the most important military harbor in North America besides like Charleston, South Carolina. So this is the only city with a higher population, or the only city rather other than New York with a higher population is Philadelphia at this point in time. So it is a very important city. This is an excerpt from the Mount Vernon website. On August 22nd, 1776, New Yorkers heard the cannon blasts of the Battle of Long Island. 5 days later, an expeditionary force of over 32,000 British regulars, 10 ships of the line, 20 frigates, and 170 transports defeated Washington's troops at Kips Bay and invaded Manhattan Island. Thus began 7 years of British occupation in the city of New York. One of my favorite anecdotes from this event was the near miraculous, or it really was miraculous. I think there was some providence involved. Escape of the last troops of the Continental Army from Manhattan, which won't happen on this timeline until November. So I'll talk about it a bit then. But they needed to escape across the Hudson River, which was just lined with British troops. You could see their fires up and down the river. But I will leave it there. They did make it on November 20th.
Alert.
Yeah, November 10th, but I'll give you the details because it's crazy. But November 25th, the show closest to November 25th is when I'll talk about that. So stay tuned. And also this setting and the region surrounding occupied New York is the backdrop for the creation and the actions of one of the most coordinated and fairly well documented espionage rings of that era on the Patriot side especially. And so I'll get a bit more into detail on that on a later show as well. But back to the Mount Vernon record. So from the beginning of the occupation in late August 1776, the British imposed martial law. Though General William Howe established an American staff police force, the British Army effectively managed all law enforcement activities. And while this police force was charged with suppressing unsavory activity by the Army, the British certainly caused their fair share of damage to the city itself. Contemporary accounts noted soldiers' frequent patronage of the city's red light district, various taverns and saloons, and systematic looting of American Patriot property. So even loyalists at the time thought that the handling of New York was way too heavy-handed, especially people who were business owners. Surprise, surprise. And just I want you guys to think about our unhinged section today while I discuss this. But especially the business owners, even Tory business owners, because the new taxes and the permits required for trade, and you had to have a visa and stuff to leave the city to do your friggin' job, restrictions making their lives harder and harder during a time that was already hard during the war was making everybody grumble quite a bit. Churches other than the Church of England, Anglican churches, were confiscated and used as barracks, stables, and prisons. Patriot-owned homes were confiscated because housing was in such short supply. So there ended up, what this did was, imagine this. Housing is in short supply, so the government takes housing from people in order to house other people. And so what ended up happening was a huge explosion of canvas tents, like homeless camps or like shanty towns springing up all over the place from all the dispossessed people. So the cost of rent increased by 400%. And this is no longer from the Mount Vernon website, guys, so you don't have to keep showing it. But inflation skyrocketed because the British underpaid for all of the foodstuffs that they were paying for. Farmers sold their goods on the black market because they wouldn't be able to get a fair rate otherwise. So food started being limited because farmers were saying, "Oh, sorry, my crop, didn't make it this year, so that's unfortunate." When it actually did, because they were selling it on the side, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to make the rent that's been going up on their land too. The cost of food went up 800% and then more. So that 800% was just in the first couple years of occupation, and this went on for 7 years. A quarter of the city ended up burning down, helping the housing issue. In 1776, in September, no one knows exactly how it started, but some think that Patriot forces probably did it because they'd rather see the thing torched than the British hold it. And that was a common sentiment. Even George Washington felt that way. So that was not uncommon. The city remained in ruins from that fire and other damage from the war for the duration of British occupation. They ended up being too busy doing all of their other stuff to actually repair anything that whole time.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see.
So the whole 7 years that the British occupied New York, it was in ruins. So that was unfortunate, just like today. And that's where we'll end the show after I hand it off to the rest of this panel to comment on this section. But I was very pleased, Jim, when you brought up that unhinged segment, because it tied in so well along with the other stuff we were talking about today with the occupation of New York.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say that the occupation of New York continues. I think that's what we see right now. It's occupied by commies. And you're going to be seeing a lot of New Yorkers trying to escape across the Hudson and then down South Florida based on how they're being governed right now. I mean, there's nobody firing cannons across the river yet. We'll see. But I love this segment, and I've said it every time we do it, Linnea, because it's really important for us to remember our history and the history of how we became a country. And the absolute miracle, as you said, I believe that there was provident intervention to have us succeed in throwing off the British monarchy. But it's been 250 years, and it's really hard to imagine, because you don't do it every day, to imagine yourself living in that time. Those people were no different than you and me. They were just as smart, probably a lot smarter, actually. They didn't have our technology, but they had a desire for freedom and liberty, and they risked everything they had, their lives, to make it happen. And the odds were so stacked against them. And it wasn't just the founding fathers who were risking their lives. The lives of everybody on this continent was in peril. And war is hard. It's hard on everyone in the country where that war is taking place. People were starving, people were kicked out of their homes. They sacrificed so much, not just the people who fought the battles, not just the founding fathers who put their necks literally on the line, but everybody on the continent was suffering for what we now enjoy. And I think it's really important to keep doing these segments so that we remember that and that we honor and live up to what they gave us.
I love the comment from one of our British viewers, how we reminisce here of the good old days. We bend over for World Economic Forum and the EU. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I as much as I'm glad that we won in that conflict, I can't help but agree with you there.
It's interesting that we have such a fear of any kind of inconvenience nowadays. And these people really, really suffered. This really brings it home in I think, a way that that has been unique among our segments on this, in that it really shows how regular people were struggling so badly to get by. And we do have a tendency nowadays to feel like, gee, if I don't get my checks from the government and so forth, everything's just awful. What these people were doing were building something for posterity. It wasn't just for themselves. They were concerned about the world that they were leaving their children, and the world that would be there for their children's children for decades and centuries to come. And we seem to have lost a lot of that perspective over time. I guess we can all blame social media if we want, but I don't think that's really just it. There's a lot more to it than that. And the fact that these people were ultimately unselfish to a large degree is what really sticks with me. And I would love to see more of it, where it's not the kind of unselfishness where you say, sort of Democrat socialist unselfishness, where you say you need to pay more in taxes, or you need to do this, that, or the other, or you need to stop driving an SUV. It's, I will put myself on the line for my children and your children and our children's children. That kind of long-term perspective is something that we really need to get back to. And I think that this segment really brought that home to me.
What this segment brought home to me was the fact that these people just abhorred tyranny, and they would put anything on the line in order to fight for tyranny. But the good news is Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are going back to England as of today. So guess what?
The last of them are
They're
expelled.
finally gone. 250 years. Gee.
Yeah, and there is
But wait, there's more.
I think he overstayed his welcome, but good riddance. Peace.
Yeah, I guess Canada didn't want them either. So sorry, UK, you guys get them
Even
back.
California didn't want them.
Again. All right, that is all the time we have today. We went a little bit over our usual which is very fun, but I wanted to make sure that we got to that segment because it tied everything together so well, and I think it makes us all reflect and feel a little proud of our country and where we've come from and what we can hopefully try to wrest back from the tyrants of today. So thank you everyone for your attention to these matters. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, except for when we're not. Jim, what have you got for the audience today?
I got nothing. I am not going to be on the Climate Realism show tomorrow. I have PTO. I got to leave town, but I'll see you the following week.
I'm pretty confident that it's going to be just a Sterling show alone. The Sterling Burnett show tomorrow. But yeah, guys, just for our viewers who normally watch the Climate Realism show, I'm fairly certain we will not be having it because I will not be here tomorrow or next week. I'm going overseas actually. And I think that, and then the following week after that is the Heartland Annual Benefit Dinner. Jim, are there still spots open?
There are still spots open. Thank you for reminding me. Gosh, that's what I'm up to. So yes, our benefit dinner, our 42nd anniversary benefit dinner is going to be at the Palmer House in Chicago. Our featured speakers are Ron DeSantis, Kevin Sorbo, and the great libertarian podcaster and thinker and economist Tom Woods. There is still time to join us there. Go to heartland.org. The first feature will bring you right to where you can get your tickets. Hope to see you there.
And that is September 3rd. So there will be no show on September 3rd because it will be our benefit and we'll be preparing for that. Sam, what have you got?
Yes, go to heartland.org and get your tickets. And also go to sdkarnick.substack.com and get your fill of genius.
Absolutely. Chris?
Heartland.org. Samantha Fillmore, she's a state government relations manager, and I are launching a 50-state campaign intending to get state legislators to actually make sure that the public schools in their states teach the truth in history about socialism, social studies classes. So please check that out. That needs to be done. The DSA needs to be stopped.
Absolutely. That is so important. And we talk about that all the time on this show, that education is kind of the starting point for stopping socialism. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a review. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I think we had a great show today. And also to our viewers. You guys are always super fun. So we will see you again when we see you again. Maybe next week, but I won't be here. So adios.